So I received this very good question from Meline, a student from The Rocket, which is my online program for handstands. In the assessments that we conducted throughout the first weeks, we realized that Meline had quite open shoulders, which means that she's able to really achieve something very straight when it comes to handstands. And yet, I have asked her to work on less optimal, less good looking, more closed shoulder shapes. And so in this video, I would like to go over the difference between open and closed shoulders just to make sure that everything is clear, but also explain a bit the logic behind what you should do and why, whether you have closed shoulders or open shoulders or something in between. So first thing first, let's recap what open shoulders and closed shoulders are. In the context of handstand, open shoulders means that you're able to flex your shoulders in such a way that you can achieve a 180-degree angle between your arm and your torso once you are fully flexed. This allows you to bring your pelvis over the shoulders, directly over the shoulders when you kick up in a handstand, which means that you can then achieve something pretty straight. When you have closed shoulders, you have less than 180 degrees in your shoulder range of motion, which in turn, because of the way handstands are, will prevent you from stacking that pelvis where you need it to be for you to be extremely straight. This usually, if you had both feet together, will lead you into either a planche shape or a slide banana shape. If you have more of a split leg position, if you're working on a more split leg alignment, you won't see it as much, but it basically means that your pelvis, as long as your shoulders are not open, you won't be able to sit perfectly straight between your feet, your shoulders, and your hands. So this already says a few things. When you have closed shoulders, you have to take into account the fact that your pelvis will have a tendency to drag you down to the floor, simply because we cannot stack it where we want it over the shoulders. This means in turn that we're gonna use our legs to compensate for that pelvis placement. My shoulders are closed, therefore my pelvis is not stacked over my shoulders, therefore my pelvis is dragging me down to the floor, therefore I'm going to use my legs and place them in such a way that I can hold a handstand. People tend to overthink where the legs should be without even realizing that everything starts from the shoulders up. So we always have to look at our shoulders, understand that it will predicate where the pelvis sits, and then realize where we should place our legs in the air so that we can achieve balance. When you have open shoulders, you can stack the pelvis over the shoulders, and therefore the pelvis is already helping you hold balance. And therefore you can place your legs in different positions. If your pelvis goes really out, which we call pike, we can lower the legs into a straddle, a frog, or a tuck. If your pelvis is right where we want it, is right at the center, over the shoulders, we can extend our hips and have our feet aligned over the shoulders and over the... And if you... When you have closed shoulders, your life is pretty easy. You want to understand your limitations today, the options that you have available, and just work on them smartly. When you have open shoulders, however, you may realize at first that while you have the range of motion, you are unable to tap into it whenever fear kicks in. So it's one thing to be able to open the shoulders in such a way that your pelvis is nicely stacked over the shoulders. It's another to be able to do that when there is no one to spot you and no one behind you. You will realize that we all have a tendency to close the shoulders because we feel stronger in that position. The more the pelvis goes overhead and the more compromised the position we find ourselves in, and the more likely we are to fall, and therefore preemptively we close the shoulders. So what we end up realizing is that there is what you can do when everything goes well, and there is what you end up doing when you freestand because you want to feel safe. I like to call the hiatus, the delta between those two things, the range of usable motion. There is what you can do when you are against the wall, and there is what you can do in real life. Real life being freestanding for now. And your goal, week by week, month by month, is to bridge that gap so that you can better and better use your range of motion when you freestand. But when we assess what you can do either with the wall or without the wall. So with the wall, it would be what you can do in order for you to float before you land on the wall, using your fingers and placing yourself in the proper position before you land on the wall. And when it comes to freestanding, it's about holding yourself 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 seconds when we look at the shape, at the alignment you consistently end up in, when you are able to perform that, either floating with the wall or freestanding, we end up realizing what you naturally tend to go into. And in my experience, 80 to 90% of the people who have open shoulders will end up slightly or really closing them when there's no wall behind them to catch them. In that scenario, I like to have them work on their closed shoulder position, because this is the one that obviously works for them, and then become stable and strong there and learn how to control the transition into something more open, which they are able to perform from an anatomical perspective. The goal is to make your training efficient. If you had 4 hours per day to dedicate to your practice, yes, we could say that only perfection matters, and we would raise the standards and force you to hold only a straight handstand, saying that anything else is subpar. But when we are training as busy adults, trying to juggle between works, our hobby, our family, and whatnot, we want our training to be fun and efficient. So we want to be able to progress faster. To do that, you want to work with what comes naturally to you, understand the pros and the cons of the shape that comes naturally to you, and work on improving that shape week by week, month by month. Namely, when you end up with closed shoulders, working on opening them, but first becoming stable and confident in the thing that feels the easiest to you. There is no point in us raising the bar in such a way that handstands become even harder than they can be. Have fun first with a handstand, although not as good looking. Remember that not so long ago, the gold standard of handstands were not a straight line. Find your 10-second handstand with a 75% success rate there, and then and only then start improving your line.